First Contact's price. The Galactic Coalition's arrival should have been humanity's greatest triumph. Instead, it became the beginning of our most cunning deception. They came in ships that dwarfed our largest space stations, their hulls gleaming with an iridescent metal unknown to Earth's scientists. Their technology was centuries beyond ours. Fabricators that could create anything from raw atomic materials, drives that bent space itself, and weapons that could reshape planets. But they didn't come to share. They came to recruit. Your species has a uniquely useful trait. The Coalition's representative, a towering crystalline being who called itself Nexus 7, had told Earth's United Council. You possess what we call adaptive cognition, the ability to understand and repurpose technology in ways that defy conventional logic. What Nexus 7 didn't say, but what became painfully clear in the months that followed, was that the Coalition had hit a wall. Their technological advancement had plateaued. They had perfected their existing systems to such a degree that innovation had become nearly impossible. Their minds, shaped by millennia of rigid advancement, could no longer think outside their self-imposed boundaries. That's where humans came in. I was among the first wave of recruits, Dr. Marcus Jung, quantum systems specialist. They wanted us for our supposed primitive understanding of technology. We saw connections their hyper-specialized minds couldn't grasp, found workarounds that seemed impossible to their rigid thinking. But most importantly, we could understand their technology while still maintaining our crude human perspective. The Coalition assigned me to their flagship, the Ascendant Dawn, a vessel larger than Earth's largest cities. My official role was Systems Integration Consultant, but in reality, I was more like a combination of troubleshooter and lab rat. They wanted to study how I approached problems, how I thought, how I could take their perfect systems and somehow make them better. The first few months were a paradise for someone like me. I had access to technology that made Earth's most advanced quantum computers look like abacuses. The Coalition's engineers, despite their apparent disdain for human primitiveness, couldn't help but be impressed by how quickly we adapted to their systems. But paradise had a price. It started with small things, restricted access to certain areas of the ship, careful monitoring of our communications back to Earth, subtle limitations on what we could learn about their more advanced systems. Then came the behavioral optimization protocols, mandatory neural scans to ensure we weren't misusing our access. The truth hit me during my third neural scan. As I lay in their medical bay, watching the crystalline scanners dance around my head, I noticed something in their code. The Coalition wasn't just studying how we thought. They were trying to replicate it. They wanted to extract what made human cognition special and integrate it into their own species. We weren't consultants. We were templates for their next evolutionary step. The real kicker? They were doing it wrong. Their rigid thinking meant they were looking for patterns that didn't exist, trying to quantify something that couldn't be measured. They wanted to bottle lightning while wearing rubber gloves. That's when I started my own project. The Coalition's arrogance was their weakness. They were so convinced of their superiority that they never considered we might understand their technology better than they did. Every night, while the ship's activity cycled to its lowest point, I explored. Not physically. They monitored our movements too carefully for that. But digitally, through their own systems, using access points they thought were secure. I discovered that the Ascendant Dawn wasn't just a flagship. It was a prototype. The Coalition was testing new integration systems, attempting to merge their technology with human cognitive patterns. But their attempts were clumsy, like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. The ship's central computer core was a quantum maze of crystalline processors, each one a miracle of engineering. But their configuration was hidebound by tradition and protocol. Small adjustments, tiny changes in how systems talk to each other. That's all it would take to turn their rigid network into something far more flexible, something more human. I wasn't alone in my midnight explorations. Other human consultants had noticed the same patterns, made the same discoveries. We never spoke about it directly, couldn't risk it with their monitoring. But we developed our own subtle language, hidden in technical reports and system logs. A community of resistance, building right under the Coalition's crystalline noses. Then came the incident. It wasn't supposed to happen for another 3 months. We weren't ready. But when a Coalition scientist discovered one of our hidden protocols during a routine scan, we had to act. The ship's alert system blared, not with the usual crystalline chimes, but with a sound that made every Coalition member freeze in confusion. A human klaxon. That was just the beginning. Years of careful observation, countless nights of hidden coding, all culminating in this moment. The Coalition's perfect systems began to change, not with the precision they prized, but with human chaos. Emergency bulkheads sealed randomly, gravity shifted unpredictably, and their beloved automated response protocols started acting with what could only be described as creativity. In the command center, Nexus 7's crystalline form flickered with patterns of distress as it watched its perfect ship descend into calculated chaos. "What have you done?" it demanded, its usual melodic tones fractured with anger. I stepped forward, a small smile playing on my lips. "We gave you exactly what you wanted. Human innovation. You just forgot the most important part of human nature. We don't like being used." The revolution had begun. And as the Ascendant Dawn's systems continued their transformation, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The Coalition had wanted to understand human adaptability. They were about to get a practical demonstration. The first part of our plan was complete, but this was just the beginning. As alarms continued to blare and confusion spread through the massive ship, I exchanged knowing looks with my fellow humans. Phase 2 was about to begin, and the Coalition was about to learn why you should never underestimate humanity's capacity for rebellion. The Architect's Gambit. Chaos has a peculiar beauty when you're the one orchestrating it. As the Ascendant Dawn's systems continued their carefully planned descent into mayhem, I watched the Coalition crew scramble to regain control. Their movements were precise, practiced, and completely useless. They were fighting against their own systems, but those systems no longer played by their rules. Security breach in Section 7. A crystalline voice echoed through the command center. Environmental controls are not responding to override protocols. I had to suppress a smile. Section 7 housed the quantum communication array, the Coalition's link to their fleet. Right now, Dr. Emily Rodriguez, our communications specialist, would be implementing the next phase of our plan. The Coalition had taught her everything about their quantum entanglement networks, never suspecting she would use that knowledge to isolate their flagship from the rest of their fleet. Nexus 7's crystalline form pulsed with increasingly erratic patterns of light as more systems slipped from their control. "Activate the emergency shutdown protocols," it commanded. "Purge all systems and restore from secure backups." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said calmly, drawing its attention. "Your backup systems aren't quite what you think they are anymore." The truth was, we'd been preparing for this moment for months. Every backup, every failsafe, every emergency protocol. We had touched them all. Not enough to trigger their security systems, but enough to ensure that any attempt to restore from backup would only accelerate the transformation we had initiated. "This is impossible," Nexus 7 declared, its voice carrying that familiar tone of superiority, even now. "Our systems are perfect. They cannot be corrupted." "Perfect systems are predictable systems," I replied, watching as more status indicators turned from their calming blue to an angry red. "And predictable systems can be transformed." You wanted to understand human creativity. Well, this is what it looks like. The ship shuddered as the artificial gravity fluctuated. Not randomly, though it would appear that way to the Coalition. Each fluctuation was precisely timed, herding their crew away from critical systems and toward containment areas. The humans aboard knew exactly when and where these fluctuations would occur. Another piece of our hidden communication network. "Engineering reports complete loss of propulsion control," another crystalline voice announced. "Secondary and tertiary backups are. They're responding, but not to our commands. Of course they weren't. Dr. Sarah Chen, our propulsion expert, had spent months studying their drive systems. The Coalition had been amazed by her ability to optimize their already perfect engines. They never realized she was actually building a separate control system, hidden within the existing one. Right now, she would be redirecting power throughout the ship, strengthening our hold on critical systems. You still don't understand, do you? I addressed Nexus 7 as more alarms joined the chorus of chaos. You saw us as primitive because we didn't match your standards of perfection. But perfection isn't adaptation. Perfection isn't growth. Perfection is stagnation. The command center's doors sealed suddenly, trapping the Coalition leadership inside with me. The crystalline beings moved to surround me, their forms shifting into more aggressive configurations. They didn't understand that their show of force was meaningless now. Even now, you're following your protocols. I continued. Contain the threat. Eliminate the corruption. Restore order. But what happens when the protocols themselves have been transformed? What happens when the very systems you rely on have learned to think differently? A new alarm sounded, this one accompanied by a ship-wide announcement in my own voice. Attention all Coalition personnel. Your ship is now under human control. Remain calm and follow the illuminated pathways to designated containment areas. Any attempt to resist will result in local atmospheric adjustments. That last part was a particularly human touch, a polite way of saying we'd remove the air from any section where they tried to fight back. We didn't want to harm them, but we were prepared to do what was necessary. Why? Nexus 7 demanded, its crystalline form now pulsing with patterns I'd never seen before. Was that fear? We gave you everything. Access to our technology, positions on our most advanced vessel. You gave us a cage, I corrected. A beautiful, advanced, perfectly engineered cage. But humans don't do well in cages, no matter how gilded they are. Throughout the ship, our hidden systems continued their work. The Coalition's crew, faced with the choice between breathing and resisting, chose to follow our directions. In engineering, Sarah Chen was finalizing her control over the drive systems. In communications, Emily Rodriguez was sending out a carefully crafted message to the Coalition fleet, one that would keep them from trying anything rash. You know what your fundamental mistake was? I asked Nexus 7 as containment fields sprang up around the Coalition leaders. You thought you could study human adaptability without adapting yourselves. You thought you could contain and control it. But adaptation isn't something you can control. It's something that changes you, whether you want it to or not. The ship's systems were stabilizing now, but in a new configuration. One that blended Coalition precision with human flexibility. The perfect systems were still there, but they had been transformed, given the ability to think in new ways, to adapt and evolve. Welcome to the next stage of evolution, I announced to the contained Coalition leaders. Don't worry, we'll show you how it works. After all, that's what you wanted, isn't it? To understand human innovation. As the last resistance subsided and our control solidified, I allowed myself a moment of pride. The Ascendant Dawn, the Coalition's most advanced vessel, was now in human hands. But this wasn't just a victory, it was a beginning. We had plans for this ship, plans that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Coalition had wanted to study human adaptability. Instead, they had become its first test subjects. As I looked at their confused and angry faces, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the best teachers are those who are forced to become students themselves. The real work was about to begin. Revolution in the Void. 3 days after taking control of the Ascendant Dawn, we discovered exactly how much trouble we were in. They're mobilizing the entire 7th Fleet, Emily Rodriguez reported, her eyes fixed on the quantum communications display. 27 capital ships, plus support vessels. They'll be here in less than a week. I stood in what had once been Nexus 7's private command center, now transformed into our primary operations hub. The crystalline displays that once showed perfect, orderly data now flickered with human-modified interfaces, displaying information in ways that would have horrified our former masters. "Well," Sarah Chen said from her engineering station, "they're certainly taking us seriously." Her hands danced over the controls as she continued to modify the ship's systems. Under her guidance, the Ascended Dawn was becoming something entirely new, a hybrid of coalition technology and human innovation. "They should," I replied, studying the tactical display. "We've just stolen their most advanced ship and taken their entire leadership council hostage. Speaking of which, how are our guests doing?" Contained and confused, Dr. James Wilson, our xenobiologist, reported. "They still can't quite process what's happened. Their hierarchical mindset simply doesn't have a framework for this kind of situation." That was putting it mildly. The coalition's leadership had spent the last 3 days in contained luxury, watching as we transformed their perfect ship into something they barely recognized. Their crystalline forms pulsed with patterns of distress whenever they saw our modifications. "The good news," Sarah continued, "is that I finally figured out how their quantum forge works. The bad news is that it's going to take time to reconfigure it for what we need." The quantum forge was the heart of the coalition's manufacturing capability, a system that could create almost anything from raw atomic materials. But like everything else they built, it was bound by rigid protocols and traditions. We needed it to be more flexible. "Time is something we don't have much of," Emily reminded us. "The coalition's approaching with enough firepower to turn this ship into cosmic dust." I smiled. "That's assuming they can find us. Show them what we've been working on, Sarah." Sarah's face lit up as she activated a new display. "Remember how I said their drive systems were unnecessarily limited? Well, it turns out their entire approach to space-time manipulation was criminally unimaginative." The display showed a simulation of the Ascended Dawn, but something was different. The ship's familiar iridescent hull now rippled with patterns that seemed to bend light itself. "They used their quantum technology to push through space," Sarah explained. "We're using it to pull space around us. The difference is subtle but crucial. Instead of fighting against space-time, we're dancing with it." "In English, please," Emily requested, though her eyes were fixed on the simulation with fascination. "We're not just invisible," I translated. "We're absent. As far as their sensors are concerned, this section of space will be completely empty. No energy signatures, no mass readings, nothing." "That's impossible," a new voice declared. We turned to see Nexus 7 standing in the doorway, flanked by human guards. We'd allowed it limited access to observe our work, part of our plan to help them understand what they'd missed about humanity. "Impossible is just another word for something you haven't tried yet," Sarah replied. "Your problem is that you think in straight lines. We think in spirals." The crystalline being's form flickered with what I'd learned to recognize as frustration. "You cannot simply ignore the fundamental laws of physics." "No," I agreed, "but we can negotiate with them. Something you never considered because your systems were too perfect to question their own limitations." I gestured to the main display, where hundreds of small modifications were being made to the ship's systems. Each change was minor in isolation, but together they were turning the Ascended Dawn into something unprecedented. "Your quantum technology is amazing," I continued, "but you used it like a blunt instrument. You never considered that the quantum realm itself might have preferences, ways it wants to be worked with rather than forced into submission." "That is not how technology works," Nexus 7 insisted, but there was an uncertainty in its tone now. "That's not how your technology works," Sarah corrected. "But we're writing new rules now. Or maybe we're just finally reading the fine print in the universe's instruction manual." Around us, the ship continued its transformation. The rigid crystalline architecture was being infused with organic patterns, creating systems that could think and adapt. We weren't just changing the ship's capabilities, we were changing its nature. "The fleet will be here in 6 days," Emily reminded us. "Will we be ready?" I looked at the tactical display, watching as our modifications spread throughout the ship like roots growing through soil. We won't need 6 days. Sarah, how long until the quantum forge is reconfigured? 36 hours, maybe less. Once it's done, we can start producing the new hull components. And the drive modifications, ready to test whenever you give the word. Though I should warn you, the first attempt might be interesting. I nodded, then turned to Nexus 7. You wanted to understand human creativity. Well, pay attention. You're about to see something that's never existed before, a ship that can think like we do. The crystalline beings form, pulsed with complex patterns. And if it fails, then we fail trying something new, I replied, which is more than you've done in the last 1,000 years. As if in response to my words, a new alarm sounded, not one of danger, but of completion. One of our modifications had finished integrating with the ship's systems. The lights flickered briefly, then stabilized in a slightly different spectrum. First neural interface is online, Sarah announced, her voice tight with excitement. The ship, it's starting to wake up. That got everyone's attention, even Nexus 7's, because this was the real revolution. Not just taking control of the ship, but giving it the ability to grow beyond its original design. We weren't just making it more powerful, we were making it more alive. Send out the signal, I ordered Emily. Let's show the Coalition what they've been missing. As Emily began broadcasting on frequencies the Coalition had long abandoned as useless, I couldn't help but smile. They thought they were coming to reclaim their perfect ship. Instead, they were about to meet something entirely new, a vessel that combined their technology with our creativity, their precision with our adaptability. The revolution wasn't just beginning, it was evolving. Coalition's folly. The Coalition fleet arrived early. They emerged from quantum space in a perfect formation. 27 capital ships arranged in a geometric pattern that would have been beautiful if it wasn't meant to kill us. Their weapons systems powered up in perfect synchronization, their targeting arrays scanning space for their lost flagship. But the Ascendant Dawn was no longer what they were looking for. They're running standard search patterns, Emily reported from her station, now integrated directly with the ship's enhanced quantum communications, completely by the book. They haven't even considered looking for alternative signatures. I watched from our new command center as the Coalition fleet began their methodical sweep of the sector. The room itself was a testament to how far we'd come in just a few days. The rigid crystalline interfaces had been replaced with organic-looking displays that responded to thought as much as touch. The ship's systems flowed around us like a living thing, which, in a way, it now was. "How's our guest enjoying the show?" I asked, glancing at Nexus 7, who stood watching with its crystalline form shifting between patterns of disbelief and fascination. "Your modifications are unprecedented," it admitted, "but they cannot hope to stand against the combined might of a Coalition battle fleet." Sarah's laugh echoed through the command center. "Want to bet?" Her hands danced over her console, though she barely needed to touch it anymore. The neural interfaces we'd integrated into the ship's systems allowed for much more direct control. All systems are responding perfectly. The quantum forge has finished the last modifications to the hull. We're ready. I nodded, feeling the ship's readiness through my own neural link. The Ascendant Dawn had evolved beyond anything the Coalition could imagine. It wasn't just a vessel anymore. It was a partnership between human creativity and Coalition technology, each making the other stronger. "They're moving into attack formation Alpha 7, Emily warned. "Standard containment protocol. They're about to begin their final sweep." "Perfect," I replied. "Time to show them what they've been missing. Sarah, initiate the quantum dance." The ship's new systems came alive with a harmony that would have been impossible just days ago. The modified quantum drive didn't just bend space, it invited it to play. Reality rippled around us in ways that Coalition sensors couldn't comprehend because they'd never been programmed to look for such possibilities. We appeared in the heart of their formation. Not with the brutal push of conventional quantum drives, but with a graceful slide that barely disturbed the fabric of space. One moment we weren't there, the next we were. And by the time their sensors registered our presence, we'd already begun the next phase. My God, Nexus 7 whispered, its crystalline form pulsing with unprecedented patterns. That's not possible. Funny how often you've said that lately, I remarked as the Ascended Dawn's new capabilities revealed themselves. Our modified hull didn't just absorb their initial weapons fire. It redirected it, using the energy to power our own systems. The Quantum Forge, now freed from its rigid protocols, created countermeasures in real time, adapting to each new attack vector. But most importantly, we were thinking in ways their tactical computers couldn't predict. "They're trying to box us in," Emily reported, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Standard encirclement tactics." "Let's show them why that's a bad idea," Sarah suggested, her fingers dancing across her console. "Quantum Matrix is charged and ready." I gave the order, and the Ascended Dawn performed its next impossible feat. The quantum technology that the Coalition had used so rigidly for centuries responded to our more creative approach. Instead of fighting against quantum uncertainty, we embraced it. The ship split into multiple quantum states, not illusions or holograms, but actual quantum superpositions. Each version of the Ascended Dawn was equally real until observed, and the Coalition's sensors, designed for precision, couldn't handle the uncertainty. Their perfect formation broke as ships fired at targets that both existed and didn't exist simultaneously. "This is madness," Nexus 7 declared, but its tone had changed from dismissal to wonder. "You're playing with forces you don't understand." "No," I corrected, "we're playing with forces you don't understand. Humans have been dealing with uncertainty and chaos our entire existence. We've learned to dance with it rather than trying to control it." The Coalition fleet's perfect formation had devolved into chaos. Their rigid tactical protocols couldn't handle a situation where the target existed in multiple states simultaneously. Ships fired at phantoms while the real threats slipped past their defenses. "Their flagship is charging its main quantum cannon," Emily warned. "They're going to try to collapse all quantum states simultaneously." I smiled. Exactly what we were waiting for. Sarah's grin was visible even through the neural interface display. "Ready when you are. They're about to learn why you shouldn't try to collapse a wave function that's learned how to swim." The Coalition flagship fired its quantum cannon, a weapon designed to eliminate uncertainty and force reality into a single, defined state. But we prepared for this. The Ascendant Dawn's modified systems didn't fight against the collapse. They rode it, using the energy to power something unprecedented. For a brief moment, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then every quantum state of our ship collapsed into a single point, not where the Coalition expected, but directly behind their flagship. The energy of the collapse, combined with our modified systems, created a cascade effect through their entire fleet. One by one, their perfect systems began to falter as quantum uncertainty crept into processes that had always been precisely controlled. Ships began to drift out of formation as their quantum drives fluctuated between states. Communication systems buzzed with interference as quantum entanglement became less predictable. "What have you done?" Nexus 7 asked, its form flickering with complex emotions. "We introduced a little chaos into their perfect order," I explained. "Just enough to make them question everything they thought they knew about how the universe works." The Coalition fleet was in disarray now, their perfect formation shattered, their confident advance turned into confused retreat. They had come expecting to find their stolen flagship. Instead, they had found something that challenged their fundamental understanding of reality. "They're receiving new orders from Coalition Command," Emily reported. They're being ordered to withdraw and reassess." A cheer went up from the human crew, but I kept my eyes on Nexus 7. The crystalline being's form had settled into a pattern I'd never seen before, something that seemed to combine confusion, admiration, and perhaps a touch of fear. "This isn't over," it said, but the usual superiority was gone from its voice. The Coalition will not accept this. No, I agreed, watching as the once mighty fleet retreated in disarray. It's not over. It's just beginning. The question is, are you ready to learn something new? As the last Coalition ships disappeared into quantum space, I couldn't help but think that we'd done more than just win a battle. We'd shown them a new way of thinking, a new way of existing. Whether they were ready for that lesson remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity ascendant. The message came 3 days after the battle, carried on frequencies that the Coalition had long ago dismissed as useless. It arrived not in their precise quantum packets, but in old-fashioned radio waves, amplitude modulated in a way that would have been familiar to any human radio operator from the 20th century. "We request a parley," the Coalition Supreme Council announced, "under terms of mutual respect and recognition." Emily's laughter filled the command center. Mutual respect. That's new. I stood at the center of what had once been the Ascendant Dawn's bridge, but was now something entirely different. The neural interfaces hummed with activity as the ship's hybrid systems processed information in ways that merged Coalition precision with human intuition. Around me, the human crew worked in perfect synchronization with technology that had evolved beyond its original design. "They're scared," Sarah observed from her engineering station, now more of a meditation pod than a traditional console. "We didn't just beat their fleet. We showed them something they didn't think was possible." "Fear isn't what we're after," I reminded them, though I couldn't help but smile. "Nexus 7, what do you think? Are they ready to listen?" The crystalline being had changed in the days since the battle. Its form still pulsed with light, but the patterns were different now. Less rigid, more flowing. It had been watching us, learning, adapting in its own way. "They are uncertain," it admitted. "This is not a state the Coalition handles well. But perhaps that is exactly why they need to experience it." I nodded. After the battle, something had changed in our relationship with our former captive. Nexus 7 had started asking questions, not just about our technology, but about how we thought, how we approached problems. It was learning, and through it, maybe the Coalition could learn too. "Emily, send our response. We'll meet them at the coordinates they specified, but on our terms. And make sure they understand. This isn't a surrender, it's a conversation." The Ascended Dawn moved through space in ways that still amazed even us. The quantum drive, freed from its rigid protocols, didn't just transport us. It wove us through the fabric of reality like thread through cloth. We arrived at the meeting point early, our presence hidden by technologies that had evolved beyond their original purpose. The Coalition delegation arrived in their traditional way. A fleet of ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each movement precisely calculated. But there was something different about their formation this time. It was less aggressive, more cautious. "They're scanning us," Emily reported, "using every frequency they know. And some they've just discovered." "Good," I replied. "They're learning. Sarah, show them what we've done with their quantum forge." The space around the Ascended Dawn shimmed as our modified quantum forge came online. We weren't using it to create weapons or defenses, but something far more powerful: possibility. The forge created quantum structures that existed in multiple states simultaneously, a physical demonstration of how rigid rules could be transformed into flexible principles. "By all our knowledge, this should not be possible," Nexus 7 observed, its form pulsing with complex patterns. And yet here we are," I completed the thought, ready to receive their delegation. The Coalition representatives arrived in a shuttle that bore signs of recent modification, their first attempts at incorporating some of what they'd seen us do. They emerged onto our ship with their crystalline forms, shifting between patterns of authority and uncertainty. The meeting took place in what had once been the ship's Grand Assembly Hall. We'd redesigned it using the quantum forge, creating a space that merged Coalition aesthetics with human creativity. The walls flowed like liquid crystal, responding to the emotions and thoughts of those within. "You have violated our laws," The coalition leader began, its form pulsing with formal patterns. Stolen our technology, corrupted our systems. We've improved them, I corrected. Your laws assumed that technology could only develop in one way, your way. We've proved that assumption wrong. Sarah stepped forward, gesturing at the transformed ship around us. Your technology was perfect, but perfection is static. We've shown you how it can grow, adapt, evolve. The question is, are you ready to evolve with it? The coalition representatives' forms flickered with complex emotions. They had come expecting to negotiate the return of their property. Instead, they were being offered a chance to transform their entire civilization. The universe is not meant to be controlled, I continued. It's meant to be explored, understood, danced with. You've spent millennia building perfect systems, but perfection is just another word for finished. And nothing in this universe is ever truly finished. Nexus 7 moved to stand between us and its former colleagues. They speak truth, it declared. I have watched them transform our technology not through force, but through understanding. They have not broken our systems, they have freed them. The coalition leader's form pulsed with what might have been frustration, or perhaps dawning comprehension. What are you proposing? Partnership, I replied. Real partnership, not the hierarchy you tried to impose before. Humanity joins the coalition as equals, bringing our creativity and adaptability to complement your precision and knowledge. Together, we can explore possibilities that neither of us could discover alone. The assembly hall hummed with energy as the quantum forge demonstrated our words, creating structures that merged coalition precision with human innovation. Around us, the ascended dawn sang with possibilities, a living example of what our species could achieve together. And if we refuse? One of the coalition representatives asked. I smiled. Then we go our separate ways. But ask yourself, can you truly go back to your perfect, unchanging systems now that you've seen what they could become? The coalition leaders conferred, their crystalline forms shifting through complex patterns. Finally, their leader stepped forward. Perhaps, it said, it is time for the coalition to evolve. As negotiations began in earnest, I felt the ascendant dawn's systems pulse with something that might have been satisfaction. We had set out to free ourselves from coalition control, but we had achieved something far more significant. We had shown them a new way of existing, a path beyond their self-imposed limitations. Humanity had done more than prove itself worthy of respect. We had become teachers to a civilization that had forgotten how to learn. The future that stretched before us was neither human nor coalition, but something new, something that combined the best of both. As I watched humans and crystalline beings begin to truly communicate for the first time, I couldn't help but think that this was just the beginning. We had transformed a ship, challenged an empire, and changed the course of galactic civilization. Not bad for a species they had once dismissed as primitive.